So I am very much looking forward to today's Zoom call with Dr. Kate Blocker. Huge topic, screen time in children.
Okay, no shaming, no finger wagging. We're just going to learn a lot.
Right, so it's one of those things that it's inevitable, right?
Yeah.
Screens are all around us, teaching them how much time, how little time, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, when, how much, all that.
Well, and Kate Blocker is with, I'm going to read this to make sure I don't goof it up. It's childrenandscreens.org, the 501c3 not-for-profit. And I'll tell you, this whole organization is such a resource for parents, teachers, and frankly, any professional, because it's all evidence-based, research-oriented, constantly changing, talks about screens and technology and AI. It's really, really interesting. I had the opportunity, David, to listen to her at a conference that I went to. And then afterwards, we sat at a round table and had lunch. And an hour and a half later, I think the other 4 people who were sitting with me, we didn't want her to leave because she had so much information.
Well, it's funny too, because it's not just children. I have adult children, night after night, they're spending hours and hours. How do you balance that? With life, with working, they're doing schoolwork, they're doing all sorts of stuff on screens.
So please, all of you, join us here on Mind Your Health.
And, modeling starts at the very beginning. Children are taking in everything about the world around them. A 1-year-old sees how important that phone is. I don't know if we've, probably all had that experience. They don't even necessarily know what that thing does yet, but they want it. They want to play with it because mom and dad have it all the time. It must be important, right? And sure, it lights up and it makes sounds, and that adds to that excitement. We also get a lot of parents to say, okay, but I have to have my phone on me because maybe work has expectations of me, or I'm waiting for grandma to call to let me know when she's going to be here to pick up the kids. And yes, as adults, we all have slightly different rules from our kids. And I think what's important there is helping them understand that.
Mind your health. You got to mind your health. Mind your health. Treat yourself. You got to mind your health.
Well, another episode that I'm really looking forward to today, what I need in my life is screen time. And not only for me, but my children and now my grandchildren. And what's appropriate screen time, what's the right things to look at, what's the amount of time we should be on, how is it affecting us?
Well,
So I'd like to introduce Dr. Kate Blocker.
and she is wonderful. I had the opportunity of hearing her speak at a conference, and she is amazing. We're doing a Zoom today for all our listeners and viewers, so we got a lot to talk about. Kate, you are with children'sandscreens.org. I'd love to have our viewers and listeners learn a little bit about what you do.
Absolutely. Thanks, Debbie. Dana, thank you for having me today. Happy to be here and talk about this topic, and of course, coming from Children and Screens. So Children and Screens is a nonpartisan independent nonprofit, and what we do is we focus on helping kids lead healthy lives in a digital world. Sounds simple, but of course, I think we all know that it's really not, and there's so much that goes into it. But we focus on 3 main things. We want to help advance the science and our knowledge around this topic. We want to translate that science for the real world. So what does it really mean for kids and families to take what the science is telling us and apply it to their lives? And then we want to drive solutions to help make the digital world better for kids, and help make the lives that they're living in it healthier as they grow up in this world. We are an intentionally independent organization. So what that means is we don't take funding from the tech industry, which really helps allow us to speak clearly and honestly about both the benefits and the risks as we help children live in this world.
One of our goals today is to have some takeaways for our listeners so that they can actually adopt some of the things that you're suggesting for us. And I guess just to kind of begin the discussion, we have 2 questions. One is developmental appropriateness. Okay, whether it's for a child or even as we get older, quite frankly, I'm real curious about that. And the second one is, what is all of this technology doing to our brains? Are we being rewired? Is neuroplasticity increased because of all of these screens and technology and AI? So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure. So, I think I'll start at the second question, which is, the truth is, we are constantly changing and growing and learning with every new experience that we have from the moment we are born, and really even before that moment, right? But especially from the moment we are born all the way through life, every experience we have, every interaction, everything that we interact with and touch and explore is going to rewire our brain in some way, right? That we're constantly learning. That's part of our job as we grow. And this is really true in childhood, and technology is no different. It is just changing what experiences are. And it changes how we experience the physical space, how we experience social space, we experience what we learn. And so, yes, it's absolutely.
Kate, David has 2 new grandchildren. How old are they now?
There'll be 3 in spring of 26.
So we've got 2 3-year-olds, we've got 5-year-olds, we've got a 10 and 12-year-old, we've got 14 and 16-year-olds with our crew, and I think everybody is like putting up their hand to say that they want to know about appropriateness, developmental appropriateness for screens. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure, thanks. And yes, as we, that's a question we get from a lot of parents and grandparents and family members. How much screen time is right for my child? When can I start using this device or that device? What makes sense? And we do have some general guidelines, but to be honest, the real answer is going to depend on the child, right? Not every 5-year-old is exactly the same. Not every 3-year-old is exactly the same. Certainly not every 12 and 16-year-old is exactly the same. Looking at their levels of maturity, responsibility, how they, even self-regulation, right? How good are they at managing their time and saying, okay, I'm going to use this thing for this purpose for 30 minutes and then I'm going to get off, and that's going to be okay, versus children who might struggle a little bit more with that.
Self-regulation.
Starting from the beginning.
Yeah, I was interrupting you by just saying that the most pivotal thing that you said was, for me right now, is self-regulation. Can the kids self-regulate?
Yes, absolutely. And I'd love to dive in a little bit more to the designs of these tools, and what that means for that process. But thinking about developmental readiness and developmental appropriateness, starting from the beginning, the babies, believe it or not, we do have to ask that question. Certainly we see kids using it, as young as 6 months sometimes and earlier. And generally the recommendation is going to be no screen time before age 2. One exception to that is video chatting with individuals that they love, grandparents, parents, people they have relationship with, and can have that back and forth contingent interaction, just like you're nodding to me right now and can respond. That's very different than a TV that's very static and how the child's concerned. After about 2, we see that the recommendations say, up to an hour, ideally something that's really high quality educational content or pro-social content. Those are going to be things that are really engaging for the child, meaningful to their social context. So not, think about age appropriateness in terms of the content and the characters, and things that encourage what we call pro-social behaviors. So helping behaviors, kindness, empathy. Because we do see, think back to Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street, research has shown that content that is very carefully curated for that age period can help teach those behaviors to children. It also helps when there's a caregiver who's engaging and watching with the child and can then comment or ask questions about what they're seeing. So part of the reason, both for the recommendations against screen time before 2 and those really careful, co-use guidelines, from 2 to 5, is that children that young struggle to learn from screens on their own. So before age 2, we really don't see any benefits from the research. And so the concern is, in fact, that screen time might displace other interactions that babies and young toddlers really need. The basic back and forth cooing and laughing and smiling that a parent or caregiver does in response, the serve and return, that 2 to 5 range, starting to help guide them in applying their learning to the real world. So, at varying levels in that window, we see children who may or may not be able to take what they learn on a screen and apply that to their real life. We call that the video deficit effect. So that's the early childhood in a nutshell, which, as you can see, even within those 5 years is really complicated. And there's a lot of nuances there. But thinking about how the child is understanding the content and how we can support them in that.
So fast forwarding to 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, is that the next sort of bracket that you put it in?
Yeah, so middle childhood, or thinking about like early, elementary school, early school years, a lot changes, particularly right now, right? Your kid might go into kindergarten or first grade or second grade, depending on what school they're in. They may get a device immediately. So whatever and this is one challenge that families are facing, whatever your at-home policies might be for screen time, maybe you have introduced it, maybe you've been trying to wait. Your school might have a different policy. And so it's important that at some point you're at least starting to familiarize them with these devices, and in particular that you are starting to have conversations. So we all have phones, parents. I have a 10-month-old at home myself. Of course I have a smartphone. Of course there are TVs in the home. We try to limit screen time as much as we can around him. He doesn't really get any dedicated screen time himself, but even background TV is something that families often don't think about, but is really important.
I didn't
and
either.
parent
Yeah,
phone use.
Wow, background TV I never thought about.
Yeah, so there's, decades of research that show that background TV can have an impact on early language development, because you don't realize it, but you say fewer words to the child, and then the child may babble, if they're pre-language, they may babble less frequently, and then as they're older, speak less frequently, because there's that other language input that your brain is taking in. And similarly with parent phone use, if I'm looking at my phone, even if I think I'm just checking it for a second, or my kid is playing independently, so it's okay for me to check my phone. Of course, we're all living in this real world. Of course, those things, do happen, but we have to think about what would I be doing if I weren't looking at my phone. I might be sitting on the floor with them. I might be playing, or even just talking while I do the dishes, for example.
And I'm raising my hands because this is like a bookmark, so I don't forget the question, because I want to keep going with the developmental piece, but I also want to talk about one of the things from a parenting point of view is, as I am holding my device saying, get off your device, Kate, get off your device, this is too much. That's something I'd like to talk about when it comes to even as we get older kids, because I know that's been a real issue with, Mom, you're telling me to stop, and you're on your iPad, you're reading your Kindle, and you're talking to 3 friends,
Absolutely. And, modeling starts at the very beginning. Again, children are taking in everything about the world around them. So, a 1-year-old sees how important that phone is. I don't know if we've, probably all had that experience. They don't even necessarily know what that thing does yet, but they want it. They want to play with it because mom and dad have it all the time. It must be important, right? And sure, it lights up and it makes sounds, and that adds to that excitement. But as we get older, that modeling is not just about showing our children what's important. It's about showing them that we can have the same challenges and follow the same rules that they do. So certainly as we get into elementary, middle school, high school, if we're going to say no phones at the dinner table, no phones in the car ride home from school, hopefully we're not texting and driving, but let's say we're sitting in the passenger seat, we want to follow those same rules because we want to do it, show them that we really believe in the rules that we're setting. Now, we also get a lot of parents that say, okay, but I have to have my phone on me because maybe work has expectations of me, or I'm waiting for grandma to call to let me know when she's going to be here to pick up the kids. And yes, as adults, we all have slightly different rules from our kids. And I think what's important there is helping them understand that. So if I'm going to have my phone on me at the dinner table because I'm expecting a call from grandma, I can vocalize that. And I can say, yes, this is the exception, and here's why, and help them understand what's going on there.
So what age, I know every time you take a breath, I'm like, this is my chance, right? At what age do you give a kid a phone? Let's just in a broad spectrum world.
Yeah, such a great question. It's such a great question, and it's such a hard question. And really, again, this goes back to, there's not going to be one size fits all. Every 14-year-old is ready. Every 13-year-old is ready. Every, whatever that age might be. To answer your question, I think what I want to do is highlight a study that came out just very recently that from a large national data set called the ABCD study. And they looked at the impacts of smartphone ownership at age 12. And what they found in their data from that part was for those who had smartphones, they compared those who had smartphones at age 12 to those who didn't, and found that that ownership was associated with a higher risk for depression, for obesity, and for insufficient sleep. And for each earlier year of acquisition, that association, particularly with obesity and insufficient sleep, was significant. And then they compared 1 year later. So for those who didn't have one at age 12, but then got one by age 13, once again found that those who acquired that smartphone in that year had greater odds of reporting clinical level psychopathology and again, insufficient sleep compared to those who still didn't have one. Now, am I saying that every 12-year-old who gets a smartphone is going to have these issues? Absolutely not, right? But we do see that, more and more the data is showing us it's probably best to wait if you can, right? And there's a lot of reasons why some families can't. There's also a lot of alternatives, phones that allow you to communicate, or devices, smartwatches that can allow you to communicate if safety is a concern or communication is a concern, but don't give the child the full access to the internet and every social media platform that's out there in the world. And so, those are some considerations that families can have too.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go too, because having daughters, I wanted to know where they were. I wanted them to be able to contact me, but I didn't want them, caught up in the drama with all the other stuff. And I think is the social media part, that's what's driving the obesity and depression. It's the interaction with other girls, I guess.
It's dopamine. Must be on my device.
It's hard, right? It's hard for a 13-year-old to not have that connection and that, yeah. FOMO is absolutely a real thing, and the digital pressures that kids these days are facing are really, really true. There's a lot when we think about what's leading to obesity, what's leading to the insufficient sleep, what's leading to the mental health concerns. One of the reasons the research is unclear is because there are a lot of different pathways. So for example, what might lead to obesity? Is it social media? Is it phone use more broadly? Is it screen time more broadly? I mean, we see impacts on physical activity levels, right, leading to a more sedentary lifestyle versus getting out. We also see, right, like kids are really targeted with junk food advertising on these platforms and across, even games and things that they may play with. So, is it encouraging unhealthy eating habits? Same for mental health. For some kids, it's going to be, that sleep is a pathway to mental health impacts as well. Maybe it's exposure to cyberbullying or hate speech or victimization online. Maybe it's just the fact that they're endlessly scrolling and comparing themselves to others. For each child, there might be a different pathway into this, and it might look a little different for how it presents.
And what you told us at the beginning, remember the thing about self-regulation? If I can't self-regulate, whether I'm 12 or 70, I'm going to have a problem on these devices, I would think, because it's going to be hard for me to transition off of them and do something else when it's easy. I don't really have to think hard. Is that fair?
It is, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because what we do see, in the research, the strongest findings when we see impacts on mental health, physical health, sleep. There are some sleep, for example, that there's a sleep consensus study that came out in 2024, I believe, that found, for young children and adolescents, both daily screen time amounts and nighttime screen time amounts were impacting sleep. So sometimes it's just genuinely these screens and our interactions with them do have an impact. But a lot of the research in particular finds strongest impacts where there's excessive use. Now, what's excessive might look different depending on the ages, right? But what we see is when children are struggling to regulate their time, so they have a hard time getting off, or they might spend more time than they even realized they were spending, or they find themselves wanting to get back on it when they're off of it, or it's displacing other activities in their life. Maybe they're having a hard time with homework or spending time with friends, in person, or focusing in class or sleeping, right? These are all signs of problematic media use. And yes, we see the associations to these harmful impacts are much stronger when that's the case. And it's hard, right? Again, particularly young kids, self-regulation is just developing. And we see more and more parents are turning to devices to help their child. My child's upset. I'm going to use a phone to calm them down. It works so well. And yet it's not giving them the opportunities to develop the skills on their own for how to calm themselves back down. And the cycle just grows.
What is a practical tip? So I have a teenage daughter, and I'm like, honey, go to bed. It's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever the time bedtime is. Get off your phone, and they're like, oh, okay, daddy. And then you check on them an hour later, peek in the door, they're on it. How do you take phones away? Do you unplug the Wi-Fi at 11 o'clock?
It's a great question. A lot of experts
you have a great
recommend.
answer?
Yeah, well, one simple one, and I say simple because obviously, every child's going to respond to this a little bit differently. And this comes back to modeling, which is really hard once again, but a very straightforward answer is no screens in the bedroom, right? No screens. And now this might, I'll caveat that with, depending on your home, maybe your child does homework in their bedroom. So maybe it's no screens behind closed doors or in the bedroom at night in particular. So making sure that they don't have a phone or a TV that's in their bedroom at night that can give them an opportunity to keep scrolling or even get notifications that might wake them up in the middle of the night. Now, parents might be saying, well, what if they listen to music to go to sleep, right? Again, this is where maybe looking to other tech tools that don't have that screen or have a very isolated purpose, where they can listen to music to help them fall asleep if that benefits them without having all of the other temptations that a phone or a television or a video game console might bring to them in the middle of the night.
Is there one, in our last kind of final couple of questions, is there one question that parents ask you absolutely more than anything else that you wish you could just broadcast to all parents when it comes to screens or technology? That's something that you deal with every day that we may just not know. I mean, because I think it's a question that I think all this comes up every day.
Every day.
For all parents and all kids. Any takeaways you have for us that we can just go home with?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most common questions we get absolutely are some of the ones we've already talked about. How much screen time is okay and when, and what device and when. And we've talked a little bit about that, but I think, the thing that I haven't gotten a chance to talk about today that is the most important is this piece about conversations. We touched on it a little bit, but I think, really intentionally sitting down as a family and talking about what are our values, broadly speaking, but how does that also apply to how we're going to interact with technology and what our rules are going to be? And if we're gearing up to having a smartphone, what are our rules going to be? What are our expectations? What happens if we can't follow those? So maybe I'm giving you a phone and then I find out that regulation is an issue. We have the right to pull that back, right? And so just constantly having open, honest conversation. It also helps us understand what the value or goals that the kid finds in the tech or the phone, right? Why do they feel the pressure to have these different platforms? And we can also talk to them about what we're learning, whether it be from new research or a webinar that we've attended or a podcast that we've listened to. How can we talk to them about, well, here's what I'm worried about and what these devices can do. Again, these platforms and devices are engineered in a lot of ways. We didn't get a chance to talk about that a lot either, but they are engineered to hold our attention and to maximize our usage. And just that basic fact, I mean, even if you can't understand all the neurological reasons for that, just the fact that that is what these tools are trying to do. And then how can we, I keep using the word tools. And so I think framing it that way with kids too. How can we make these tools serve us and our goals and our values and not interfere where we might be wanting to do something else?
I like that.
Yeah, Dr. Kate Blocker, you've been an amazing guest. I think our listeners and viewers have learned a lot. We love practical takeaways. You've given us those. We're very grateful. I think we've done sort of a mini dive. We would love to have you back at some time to talk about what you just mentioned, maybe a deeper dive into screens and things that they can, I mean, they're good. They're not going anywhere, and how to use them. So we want to thank you very much for coming here.
And then if we're looking for more information, the childrenandscreens.org, does that talk about a lot of the stuff that we just talked about today?
Yes, absolutely. We have a learn and explore section of our website that is just full of resources. We have webinars, we have a podcast, parenting tip sheets, and more, where they can come learn about whether it be a specific age of development or topic that they're interested in. Encourage them to come check out those resources.
Well, Dr. Kate Blocker, thank you so much for coming to Mind Your
Mind your health. You got to mind your health. Mind your health. Treat your